I come from a sort of Roman Catholic split Anglican background, and I think the religious impulse is in all of us, right? Are you asking questions about the fabric of the continuum? That's where religion begins. We are on some fundamental level one. I mean, that's such a beautiful message. And of course, not a believer, I'm a knower. I actually saw a UFO when I was a schoolboy. Certainly, I mean, I'd love to be able to say it's all spiritual and it's not to do with machines, but what I saw was clearly a machine. And it was beautiful. My first reaction was how beautiful it was, not how weird it was. Therefore, if it was some sort of hallucination, it was the most intriguing hallucination in human history. And as I say, I'd love to say there are no UAPs, you know, like the Tic Tac or whatever these things are, but there clearly is. There clearly are these phenomena. What disturbs me and what intrigues me, both, is that these abduction stories, they all sound more like rituals to me. And so, hang on, so American airspace isn't safe now. It's not impenetrable. Well, the Department of Defense have nearly made a religious credo of it being impenetrable for the last 20 years at least. I think ufology is absolutely vital. Let me throw something down at both of you. A gauntlet is thrown down now. But if all this is going on with Dodd making bizarre and self-contradictory statements and clearly not being able to secure American airspace now, and they admit there are machines that float over aircraft carriers, you can't get more physical and threatening than that. And they're at a complete loss as to know what to do. And what does it mean to us as individuals, not simply human society? We need to know. We need to know. We all need to know. That's the end of the story. We need to say, yes, it's real. Right, now what? Where do we go from here?
The following program is presented for general information, education and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be advice of any kind. The content, views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals involved. The use of information on this program is at the user's own discretion.
Welcome one and all, wherever and whenever you may be. This is Universal Disclosure, meeting the moment. My name is Mike, an active UAP field investigator in Southern California, with my co-host.
And I'm Reverend Stu in Melbourne, Australia.
And we have another amazing conversation, I'm sure, coming up today for you. Stuart, why don't you take the lead on this one and also introduce our guest? I think that would be appropriate.
Well, thank you, Mike. This is Reverend David William Parry, a friend of mine in the UK, who's open to discussing these topics we discuss here. And I'm very honoured and privileged he's decided to join us today. I can't wait to hear what he's got to say.
Likewise, I can't wait to virtually meet him. He's been an international speaker for some time, featured on the TEDx stage. It doesn't get more legit than that. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it is our privilege and honor to introduce Reverend David William Parry. All right, Reverend Parry, thank you so much for joining us. It's my privilege to virtually meet you.
I like meeting people. As I said often, I'm a people person, virtually or otherwise. A great honor to be on your show and have a good old chinwag this morning, because for me it's morning.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. We're sort of doing an orbit around the world right now. For Stuart, I think it's around 5 p.m. and for me, it's midnight. So we're really connecting the dots here across the world. I think it's great.
Yeah, I'm not a morning person. I used to be in my youth. In my youth, I'm 66 this year. In my youth, I just sort of, I suppose like all of us, get out of bed and 5 minutes later I'd be at work. Not even notice the transition. Nowadays, I have to go through this bizarre ingrained ritual of staring at the ceiling for 10 minutes, then making my first cup of coffee, then moving about a bit, then making my second cup of coffee. The joys of getting slightly older in a world and civilization such as ours. There we are. It could be worse, couldn't it? I mean, I could be starving to death in Africa or fighting for religious liberty in India. So, the angels bless me endlessly. And it's, as I say, a pleasure to be on the prog.
Oh, that's so wonderful. So, Stuart, would you mind filling in the folks listening or watching out there? How do you know Reverend David?
Well, Reverend David first came on my radar when I was listening to a fairly prominent Gnostic radio program. and I was very intrigued and interested in what he had to say. Then we connected and had a few discussions, and I just really, really respect this man. I love his intelligence, his level of articulation when he speaks, and I know he's got some interesting information to discuss with us on these topics that we're exploring.
All right, I
Right.
can't wait. I do want to start. We've Reverend David. We do have a little tradition here. Stuart and I are musicians. We met that way, so I like to break the ice with musical question. And I hear one of your favorite songs. I know you'll potentially have a lot of them, but "Good Vibrations" by the Beach Boys. What about that song do you like so much?
I don't know, sort of the paranormal meets everyday life, since we're in an ocean of vibrations, hopefully most of which are good. It's fun, it's catchy. I like the Beach Boys. I mean, I'm a Wagner freak. So, I want to storm Valhalla with the Valkyries half the time. But, you can't do that morning, noon, and night. Or if you do, you're sort of some sort of psychopath, let's face it. So, just chill, have a glass of wine and listen to some fun music. It's fun, it's light-hearted, and it's got a good message. Let's all get some good vibrations. So that's why I sort of like that. And it's quite tunic. It's quite tunic.
Nice, awesome. Well, I mean, Stuart, I just want to sort of turn the reins over to you. I know you have some questions, and I'm going to sort of sit back and listen and interject maybe from time to time, but take it away.
Thank you. Reverend David, do you mind if I start by asking you, what has been your spiritual journey? Did you start out in an orthodox or mainstream tradition originally?
I think you're asking the most difficult question first, curiously. Biographical questions for me tend to go on for days, as opposed to just sort of an answer I can fit into a pigeonhole. Also, you're dealing with categories. I sort of deny. I cannot understand nowadays what someone means when they're saying they're being orthodox after a century and a half of incredible biblical insight into the ancient languages. It wasn't written in English, and the minute that's back on the table and the level of scholarship that's gone into biblical research, the higher criticism, the lower criticism, and so on, you suddenly find yourself in a very different world or series of worlds. People holding on to orthodoxy nowadays, unless you're Greek Orthodox or Russian Orthodox, which of course means something very, very different. It means you're pursuing a type of spiritual path, not a specific religious ideology. Means that your ideology, your narrative, even if you're a Southern Baptist, this will get me barred from everywhere. Actually, after the higher criticism, you've got to hold on to the fact that a lot of what you're saying is ideological as opposed to theological. So, that's affected everyone. I don't see a problem with that. I mean, do we really want to know what these texts mean or not? It's really that simple. And the fact we've all got to acknowledge whether certain people like that or not, I personally have no problem. I'm a liberal Catholic, which we can go into, which doesn't just mean, a freewheeling voice in the Catholic Church, because it's a lot more complicated than that. Liberal Catholics always embrace scholarship. It's part of our tradition. But, the minute that's on the table and the interconnections, the deep weave between other parts of the Abrahamic revelation, no one can deny the minute you're looking at biblical texts that the Jews, obviously, the children of Israel, are intimately involved. Excuse me, they have very different views of certain subjects. And then Islam simply can't be dismissed because it's based on those texts. How it developed from there, and Muhammad's, peace be upon his name, his revelation is in one sense a different issue because what he's constantly doing is quoting Hebrew and Christian texts to prove his own point. Therefore, you can't just kick that into touch. Excuse me. And the minute all that's interwoven, you've got to start asking other questions like, okay, if we're looking at an Abrahamic stream of revelation, and that's a complicated word, how does that fit into spiritual paths like Buddhism, which half the time would say, actually, we're not religious. What we're talking about is a state of consciousness that can be achieved without the aid of any type of revelation. So asking me a question like that is, I'm sorry, I'm babbling already, is actually quite complex. I mean, certainly On the level of sort of mere biography, I come from a sort of Roman Catholic split Anglican background. So, in other words, nobody ever went to church and nobody ever discussed religion. My stepfather was Roman Catholic. I think he'd seen seen the inside of a church at least 40 years before we all knew him. My mother was Anglican, and it's almost like a sort of taken as a read. All right, you don't go to church here, but you think it's a good idea, and you might go one Christmas to hear, to hear the carols, but that will be about it. So I certainly didn't get any type of religious impulse from them directly. If anything, it was encouraged, and I think the religious impulse is in all of us, because it's that impulse, it's that need to ask questions, the deepest questions. Why am I here? What does it all mean? That's the origin of religion. If you think it's, the risk of getting unfashionable on this show, ETs coming down and saying, you will believe this. That's not religion at all. They need to get a dose of religion, right? Are you asking questions about the fabric of the continuum? That's where religion begins. So it was my aunt that actually recognized that in me, recognized when I was 12 years old, a pup, a baby, that this was going on in me. And she bought me a book on comparative mythology for one of my Christmases, and I couldn't put it down.
Wow.
My heavens, look at all this stuff going on, and people have believed this and people have believed that. And what I saw, curiously, was a continuum. I didn't see endless fragmentations and clashes, because they all seem to me to be talking about similar things, actually in a very similar way. So that was my point of origin. I mean, I inquired into those streams a little. I respect Roman Catholicism, please don't get me wrong. I respect Anglicanism, please don't get me wrong. But certainly they weren't really for me, particularly when I realized I was gay. The minute you realize you're a homosexual, and the sheer level of mindless, not informed, mindless prejudice in those traditions, you have to sort of spread your wings a bit and say, okay, God, we can't just jettison all of this. That's barbaric, that's Neanderthal. But what does it all mean in my particular position? Is there any knowledge available? How about that for a link? Is there any knowledge available in any of these worlds? And of course, that was the origin, the source of my interest in Gnosticism, which eventually sort of I pursued reasonably successfully and met some extraordinary people in various countries who said, yes, we're modern Gnostics, we're looking for that state of knowledge around us and inside us, and why not join us? So does that answer? Am I babbling already, Stuart?
No, I like that very much, because it shows your openness to follow the path as you're led on that path. Now, I am a member of the Apostolic Johannite Church, which is a rebooting of the Gnostic Church formed by Apostle John and also John the Baptist. And I'm also affiliated with Unity Church. So my journey has been somewhat similar. I'm following where the information leads, where the evidence leads, and I'm very comfortable in that space. So I'm very happy with that answer you gave. Thank you very much.
I have a huge amount of time for Unity Church. Yeah, that strikes me as Gnosticism in a modern form. The whole Unity enterprise, we are on some fundamental level one. I mean, that's such a beautiful message. And of course, the core of the Abrahamic revelation. But we can chat about that later, maybe.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. Well, could I ask you, how do you personally feel about these UAPs, UFOs? What do you think they are?
I'm all for them. Yeah. God, is it right? Thank you, Stuart. Another simple question to get me on my way. I'm not a believer. I'm a knower. I actually saw a UFO when I was a schoolboy. So for me, it's not a question of are they there or not. I know they're there. The question for me is something a little more sophisticated and something a lot of enthusiasts, and I mean enthusiasts, I don't mean cranks, I don't mean crazies, enthusiasts. It's an exciting subject. A lot of them want to say they know absolutely everything in one go. That's not life, and it's not life in any area of life, let alone something as subtle and complicated as ufology, whatever that means. Certainly, I mean, I'd love to be able to say it's all spiritual and it's not to do with machines, but what I saw was clearly a machine. We were all in the playground.
Whoa.
I'm a country boy. What can I say? Countryside bumpkin. We were all in this lovely little countryside school. We had a headmistress who I remember to this day, the insane Mrs. Smith, who we all loved. We loved her to bits. She'd come in, all the teachers hated her, but she must have been doing something right. She'd suddenly stop classes. Her Land Rover, she must have been worth a bob or two in those days if she had a Land Rover. She'd suddenly stop, and all these skis would be thrown onto the floor, and she'd cancelled classes, and she said, right, now we're all learning skiing. So we all put our feet into the skis. We walked up the piece, down the piece to the side of the road. We all loved her. So it was that type of school. It was private. It was very well read in the set. There wasn't a choice. There was no other school in the countryside where I lived at that particular time I could have gone to, and my parents didn't want me travelling for hours on end. So it sounds posh, but the actual reason is it wasn't posh. It was difficult to get to other schools and locations, although I suppose it was posh, but there were. Anyway, we were all in the playground one morning. Beautiful blue sky, not a cloud in it, nothing fluffy, nothing vaporous. And it wasn't me that first saw it, so I can't claim to be a Moses-like figure, leading people to a great revelation. Some kid said to me, "Oh, look at that!" And I thought, what? So as usual, I can never see, like in horror movies, I can never see where the monster is. I can never see what's going to happen next. And all these bloody movies these days, all these flashing lights and effects with shadows, so I can never see what's going on. And we saw a King Kong Godzilla movie yesterday night with supper. I couldn't even see Godzilla. I mean, how could you miss something the size of that? So, we're all looking at the sky, and I saw it. I couldn't believe it. Your classic, beautiful, silvery disc. And it was beautiful. My first reaction was how beautiful it was, not how weird it was. Not a sound, not a single sound. Remember, it's the countryside, no traffic, so you might hear a little bird song, you might hear the scream of kids playing, but nothing else. And it floated, it glided elegantly across the sky. I mean, we all saw it. Therefore, if it was some sort of hallucination, it was the most intriguing hallucination in human history, simply because of the next development, the next overflow of events. Some kids didn't take to it well. Some ran off screaming, "They're cowards." You always get cowards in a playground. Some started fighting. You always get bullies as well. Look, it's not yours. It's whatever it is. It's up there. It's not yours. Don't try and claim the playground. The more robust of us decided we needed to tackle the teachers. I mean, this little miracle is happening, so let's try and get a teacher involved. We went up to their common room, and were told it's tea break. We don't care what's happening. It's tea break. We're not coming out. So, I'd done reasonably well in mainstream education, but I lost all faith in education that day. So this miracle's happening in the playground, above the playground. Nobody can be bothered to bloody move because it's tea break. The first thing that happened, teachers, God bless them. Where would we be without them? But for God's sake, the first thing that happened when we got back in the classroom, because they knew they'd made an error. They knew they'd made an error. The first thing they said was, right, we want no talk of flowing saucers. Right, so there we are. Forget the whole thing. So, I mean, we saw what we saw. So it's not a question of believing. I know they're there. And as I say, I'd love to say there are no UAPs, like the Tic Tac and whatever these things are. But there clearly is. There clearly are these phenomena. If they're machines, and as I say, what I saw was clearly a machine, I don't know, you're looking at a series of further questions, I suppose, like what type of intelligences would use vehicles, if that's what they are, or reconnaissance mechanisms of that type. And, the fact they're doing such an awful job. If they're trying to survey the world, haven't you done it now? I mean, the US Navy did it years ago. What's your problem? What is it you don't know about the distribution of landmass by now? Should we send you a book? You can learn it that way. And these weird abductions.
Mm.
What is it about the human body you don't know yet? Grey's Anatomy sorts it all out. Let's give you a gift. We can send it through the post. So clearly that's not what's going on. What disturbs me and what intrigues me, both, is that these abduction stories, they all sound more like rituals to me, as
Yeah.
opposed to, physiological investigations. The entities, the intelligences involved, they all stand in a circle nearly invariably. Somebody takes the lead, certain things are said, certain procedures are undergone, but that's a ritual. That's not a scientific investigation, that's a ritual. And then again, invariably, they will be told this is, in one form or another, this is for the good of your planet. That's like a hypnotic trigger. Yeah. Why do we need to be told that? Why are you saying that? What are you trying to achieve by this statement after that bizarre series of events? So for me, as I say, since that day, I've never been a believer there's no need to be. UFOs are real and they're there. How they tie in with much more subtle manifestations, which I've also seen, like balls of light, which I've interacted with, and other much more clearly metaphysical, and I think that's a big word, metaphysical manifestations of this phenomena. I don't know, but I think that's really the type of question we need to be asking each other, as opposed to all turning up, no disrespect to anybody, in a conference. I think I'm aiming at Gaia, actually. All turning up in a conference and, oh my God, they're still surveying the planet. Oh, please, surely not. What are they doing wrong? So that would be my answer to that. Yes, they're real. Watch the skies. Although, of course, at this stage, it's not going to do us any good, because we need to ask some more intelligent questions. I think the American attitude aspect, emotional aspect of all this is intriguing. So it's taken them all these years to admit something they knew already. I suppose that's showbiz. And so hang on. So American airspace isn't safe now. It's not impenetrable. Well, the Department of Defense have nearly made a religious credo of it being impenetrable for the last 20 years at least. And oh God, if you're looking for modern demonism, look at Dodd. Good heavens above. There was go on, I go off on tangents. Shut me up.
No,
I
this is
mean,
good.
they had a conference recently about the Superman, how you could breed super soldiers. Remember, this is Dodd, not a UFO conference, not a sci-fi conference. It's not Comic-Con, about how you could do that, and they all agreed. The brass all agreed that you could do it, and how maybe it should be done, because then you could have human beings that didn't feel about killing anybody. That's demonism, whether you like it or not. It's demonism. So that we need to do some soul searching. I mean, I'm bound to say that, aren't I? But we need to do some soul searching. I think ufology is absolutely vital. Let me throw something down at both of you. A gauntlet is thrown down now,
Please.
because people in that field tend to see it as tangential. They tend to see it as a nice thing you do at weekends. They tend to see it as, oh, that's a bit of a laugh. Oh, it's interesting. But if all this is going on with Dodd making bizarre and self-contradictory statements, and clearly not being able to secure American airspace now, and they admit there are machines that float over aircraft carriers, you can't get more physical and threatening than that, and they're at a complete loss as to know what to do. And then the thing floats up again. Well, what was it doing and why? All of a sudden, this isn't a series of tangential inquiries. This is to do with not only various types of national security, but it's also to do with our relationship with whatever these phenomena are. And of course, I'm going to take the next logical step, claiming that they've been here forever. This phenomena have been here forever, and it's only now that we're really in a position to start asking very serious questions about all of what this means, and what does it mean to us as individuals, not simply human society. Right, I've babbled on. You can shut me up now.
No, that leads me into
Anyway.
that leads me into the next question, actually, David. Now, one of the senior members of two of the churches I mentioned earlier, I had a discussion with, and I asked them, have you been called on by anyone in aerospace or the military to discuss these topics, the esoteric meaning or level of these? And the person said, yes, I have, but I'm not at liberty to divulge that information. Now, have you been approached by any of these people, or are you aware of other people who have been in our esoteric community?
Right, starting firstly, no, I have not, he said cryptically. Is that true or not? No, I have not, and they probably wouldn't because they know I'm a loudmouth. But oh God, I'm a child of the Enlightenment, right? Everything needs to be discussed. I'm sorry. We all this need to know. We need to know. We all need to know. That's the end of the story. So they know I wouldn't shut up. So no, they probably would. In a month of Sundays, never invite me. Curiously, I do know people that had far less to say about it than me. So I wonder what type of people they're getting as whistleblowers. It may not be the most qualified or the most articulate, because dare I get unfashionable for a third time this morning? Are they the ones looking for a career in all of this? Because I'm not. Yes, I interacted with a UFO, and you can find my video in 14 parts. So yes, I do know people, because of course the Ministry of Defence in this part of the world says it doesn't take an interest, but we all know it does. Unwritten rules of British life. I mean, we're not a democracy in the American or Australian sense of the word. We all know our place. We all know when to shut up. I mean, any country that can still have a monarchy in this day and age shows the fact we're all beaten to the ground, doesn't it? There are certain things in Britain that you all know that no one ever talks about. We all know they're interested. We all know if they're asked officially, they're going to say, no, they're not interested. It's just what happens in Britain. What they expect to learn, I don't know. Because I say for two reasons, they're asking, in my humble opinion, the wrong people. They're also asking the wrong questions. Did you see a UFO? Yes. What was it like? It was in the sky. And we're back to the level of children again. I think what's holding back the UFO community is its inability in certain quarters to mature. We need to say, yes, it's real. Right, now what? Where do we go from here? So that's a long answer to what looked like a simple question. Am I willing to be approached? Yes, I also do public events, bar mitzvahs. My rates are very reasonable. If anyone can contact me.
Now, would you say there have always been groups, secret societies, three-letter agencies, maybe, that have understood or at least been aware of this phenomenon going back in history?
Oh, right. I used to do a show with my dear friend Paul Obertelli. He was the conspiracy boy, and I wasn't because I'm not. They all know. No, they don't. If they all knew, we'd all be reacting differently. If there's one overwhelming sign of government apparatus in any country, it's they don't bloody know what they're doing. Whether it's New York, Washington, Moscow, Beijing, it's this human inability to sort itself out because there are so many conflicting interests that I can't offend him, because when it comes to a vote in the party assembly, I can't offend her. She's been an MP for 50 years. So it always comes down to the factionalism of human life and human affairs. Do I think there are secret bunds and secret Illuminati groups? I know a friend of mine was recently taken in by one of these false Illuminati groups. What are the Illuminati? Oh, let's get historical and realistic. A group of scholars in the 1800s that thought they could blow away the Vatican with the light of knowledge. There we are, the Illuminati. What happened to them? They all got lucrative careers in various universities. And decided I'd much rather have that and not be a complete outsider. One or two of them high-ranking Freemasons, and there may be lodges with inside Freemasonry. I mean, I'm actually on speaking terms with Grand Lodge, or at least I was when I lived in London way back. Beautiful Art Deco building. They think all of this conspiracy stuff is absolutely hilarious. Why? Because they have organised tours around the building for tourists. You know, it's a national treasure. It's an art treasure. They're very proud of it. And look at this candelabra. Do you know who that was made by? You know, so there's nothing off limits. And if you ask them, yeah, okay, what about all this Illuminati stuff? They will very quickly say, look, there are 4 degrees. There are side degrees, but that's nothing to do with Grand Lodge. That's to do with people meeting up and doing whatever they do. Like the Scottish Freemasonry, now I live in Scotland, of course, went down a slightly different route. I mean, it's got officially 33 degrees, but again, they're side degrees. They're not, there are 4 basic degrees, period. Do I think these groups have secret knowledge of UFOs and other intelligences? No, I'm sorry, I just don't. If they had that level of insight, the sheer clout, the sheer power, the sheer influence they would be able to wield, and human beings being human beings, well, no one can keep anything quiet for too long, and certainly no one can keep privilege quiet ever. No, it would become noticeable. And we'd all be under the thumb already. I mean, the only narrative of that sort that makes sense to me, not that I believe him, he added quickly, is David Icke. Goalkeeper, wasn't he? I can't remember the team. And the leader of the British Green Party for a while before he had a series of quite real, I believe that's spiritual revelations. Like everyone who's not got a guide, a pastor, a priest, a guru, a teacher, he went off the rails because of it's a real spiritual experience. Therefore, the sense of orientation had been removed, and there are no series of references. What's a religion? A map of references you keep saying as all this stuff is unfolding, right? That's what it is. Why is organised religion important? Because that's what it's doing, if it's doing anything. And he went off the deep end, and we all end up with these lizard stories. Do I think the royal family is composed of lizards? Well, I mean, they all look a bit leathery, don't they? They're sort of, I don't know, give it a rest. You know, you've got to get their oar in. Like the recent portrait of King Charles, you know, what was my attitude to that? Oh, God, it's royals trying to make themselves look relevant again. Give it a rest. You know, let's get rid of the monarchy once and for all. You know, was it satanic? Was it this and was it that? No, it's them thinking, isn't this art? Aren't we cool? No. After all these years, no, go. So, no, I don't think that. If there were ever a group of people privileged and blessed to encounter higher powers, higher intelligences as a group, then I suspect it's probably linked in with the great religions, as opposed to little secret societies, because you can see the impact of the religions, on a cultural, historical, ideological, and even aesthetic level. Therefore, but I don't even believe that. I mean, there are certain UFO people, I won't name names because I'm not attacking, one of whom claims to have worked with UFOs, and the only forbidden document was a series of documents that high talking about the involvement with ETs and religions. Oh God, you need to come to one of my sermons. You need to study religious studies. It's in every university these days. Are ETs descending to the earth? As I say a minute ago, we have bubble heads. We are indoctrinating you. I mean, number one, it hasn't worked. And number two, how is that finding your place in the continuum? Religions and moral stories about becoming decent human beings, and the fact that there might be more to us than just animals fighting to death in a forest. It's not about, I am now obeying my ET masters. No, where, when? Just show me one example. I'll settle for one. Got it right. I've gone off on a tangent again. I'm sorry. No, I don't. Mixing in Gnostic circles, I'm very aware that what they're trying to do isn't communicate with ETs. They're trying to take the journey within to find higher states of consciousness within themselves. They're not trying to re-establish something that wasn't there in the first place. If, of course, they meet entities along the way, that's a different story. And maybe these things, I'm really distressed by the modern world. Whereas if someone uses the word psychological all of a sudden that's kicked into touch like it's not real. It doesn't mean that. Psychological simply means interior to, and like just as real, if not more real. Therefore, I can see people getting together in that sense, maybe a group of doctors, of physicians trying to compare papers and what their studies are. But no, sorry, Stuart, no. And what, all the people that are whistleblowers on their own particular secret society, why are they all so unimpressive? If you contradict yourself in the first couple of sentences, you need an education, not idealization, not ideal. Are you to be admired when you can't even thread a sentence together? No, live with it. There we are.
If I could just
Very
interject real
fair.
quick, Reverend David, your energy is amazing. I love it. This
This is me
topic
in the
is
morning. This is me in the morning. You ought to see me in the afternoon.
this is such a heavy and serious topic, and you have a great attitude about it. It bring a levity to it, which I think is refreshing and well needed, especially perhaps in this particular point in our overall larger conversation that we've had with some other folks. That was, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Well, I think the West has forgotten how to have a good laugh. I read lots of psychologists because that's the kind of guy I am. One of the threads to my bow is counselling. Everyone thinks I'm this sort of diehard Jungian, very interesting guy, but actually I'm not. My background in that was Rogerian, the Yank Carl Rogers. What a psychologist! Looking at all the different types of conceptuality interior to a human being, and himself saying, what we're doing is mapping the way to our ideal selves, and that's done in a positivistic and scientific manner. Wow, that's an achievement. Either you're po-faced either you've got a po-faced attitude to life. Look at how important I am, or you enjoy it, love it. We're human beings in the miracle of creation. It's I live now on an island, a Scottish island called Bute. It's in the Hebrides. I notice if I say Hebrides nowadays, everyone thinks we're freezing to death and fighting polar bears morning, noon, and night. We've had nicer temperatures than London recently. As I say, if I looked in that direction, I'm overlooking the sea. If I look in that direction, we've got hills, we've got stone circles, and if I look down there a bit, we've got a gorgeous little tiny market town, Scandinavian style. How can all this not be wonderful? We enjoy life. It gives a sense of perspective. Laughter gives a sense of perspective and sanity. And if we all realize there's nothing disrespectful in a good laugh, there's a difference between laughing at and laughing with. If you're laughing at, they're just a poor human being. I'm sorry, grow up a bit. If you're laughing with, maybe you're joining in with the whole flow of the continuum and just appreciating where you are and what you are and why you are. So thank you for that, Mike. I try and do my best to be the laughing pastor. I hope that one catches on. And, because what's the alternative? The alternative is just to... we all terrify each other about mice in the kitchen and invisible giants on the staircase. There's no need, and it also holds back real questions about where we are and who we are and what we are, which in themselves, has a knock-on effect, a domino effect upon much more subtle questions like UFOs. What are they? What could they be? What's intruding into our lives? If it's an intrusion, maybe it's something else.
Yeah, indeed.
No, I want to thank you and honor you for bringing that energy because it's really welcomed.
Thank you.
Well, on the Jungian shadow work, there appears to be a correlation between trauma and the appearance of this phenomena. So, in the theater of war, that was certainly a traumatic environment. I'm interested in your perspective on the World War II phenomena of Foo Fighters. If you have any thoughts on that.
I find it difficult separating the phenomena as it manifested then during the scenario of a war, as opposed to the phenomena manifesting anywhere else. What it did was interact with human beings in a time of crisis. Does that mean anything apart from the fact it was a social an historical time of crisis for the world? I'm not sure it does. Does it mean ETs didn't know what we were doing and were trying to work it out? So again, you're back to these stupid ETs. If you can't work it out, why not listen to Churchill? Why not listen to Hitler? Oh, we're now going to buzz aeroplanes to work out what is going on. Why? Listen to a few radio transmissions. I'll buy you a ticket to see some footage and you can work it out. I'll sit there in the cinema and explain it to you. No, these are false questions. The fact it might have been more active at that particular time and more interactive now, that's interesting. Not the fact it took a particular complexion, because I can't see what the difference in the complexion would be. Certainly the military proved basically incapable of denying what was going on. That was the difference, because their basic attitude is, we don't want to know, shut up, until very recently. And it was happening so often that they really couldn't deny that. And all these brave, I mean, we're celebrating D-Day in this neck of the woods at the moment. Yesterday was the main celebration. Our new Prime Minister decided he had to leave the celebrations early because he had a political interview on one of the TV channels. This is the state of Britain now, okay? So politics now overrides, the politics of the moment now overrides everything, right? Disgusting. The fact that ET is intruding into our lives in different ways, no, I can't see that. Trauma, again, you're talking about psychological states the minute trauma comes up. States of war, traumatizing. For some people, and this isn't a dig and this isn't a joke, getting up in the morning, and I don't mean me, is traumatizing. Having a background in counseling makes you very aware that some people cannot maintain basic life skills for various reasons. Maybe they've been traumatized by their family, their friends, their environment, and even getting up in the morning and making a cup of tea will be a Herculean task. The minute words like trauma come up, I'm on very familiar territory. You're talking about psychological landscapes. Because one is a global trauma as opposed to a personal trauma, on one level is neither here nor there. Are ETs extra involved in that? No. We're more aware of their presence and activities because it's a time of human trauma. But that doesn't mean they're interacting with us differently because they're feeding off the trauma or interacting with the trauma. Their activities, these Foo Fighters, so-called, that wouldn't have made any sense. If anything, it would have been adding to the trauma. Is it some secret Nazi weapon? And I believe that was said, that's being aimed at us, that's monitoring the Spitfires, this innovative new war machine, all that's going on. I mean, certainly those are the reports of the time, but I don't see anything specific in that. If anything, ET strikes me, broad brushstroke when I say ET, if anything, these intelligences strike me as interested in therapy, as opposed to increasing trouble in a crisis. I mean, closing down nuclear bases and shutting down warships, which has been reported recently, that strikes me as a very, if that's true, is a very positive intervention for somebody who's worried about bigger issues. Why can't they do it everywhere? Can we have just a general shutdown, please? And of course, why wouldn't they do that? Because that would trigger a conflict. Who are these? Who is doing this and why? So you can even see why they wouldn't do that. No, I can't see anything special about that. It feeds into the paranoia of human conflict, and the fact that the Nazis, strange group of people, were making all sorts of inflammatory, usually ideological statements. I mean, it was propaganda. We've got super weapons that will wipe you gnats out of the sky. Well, I mean, they didn't. I mean, it's warfare on a psychological level. I mean, the incredibly questionable Nazi elite would have done and said anything to have won the war. So no, I see psychology at work, and I see therapies at work. And no, we're all traumatized as human beings on one level anyway. So no, I see nothing separate in that. Sorry.
No, that's quite all right. Thank you. David, I wanted to ask you, please, without naming specific people, have individuals privately confided in you regarding their UAP or UFO experiences? Does that come up?
Curiously, I can make that a very short and simple answer. Yes. Loads of people have talked to me about these experiences. A fair percentage simply do not want to discuss it. A fair percentage actually wish it had never happened. Now, that's the interesting
Wow.
facet here, because all of a sudden the universe is a bigger place. They don't want that. They want to go on holiday twice a year. They want to shag the mistress or the office secretary. They don't want responsibility. I'm going to Benidorm to get zonked. They don't want a bigger universe. So that's the contingent that interests me most. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've hardly ever come across anybody. They do exist. And I read that as somebody shutting themselves off from the continuum, which is easily done. If you don't really want to be interactive with these things, you don't have to. Lots of people just simply don't want the hassle. Is it where they're afraid of being called crazy? No, all that's in the past. Is it mildly interesting at a dinner party? Yes. But how much does he earn again? So it'll be one of those passing topics. It won't be this be all and end all revelation. That's gone. They just don't want the hassle, or they don't want people to think that, can it happen to them? Oh my God, there's a UFO behind me. No, I mean, basically, I think nearly everyone has a story of the paranormal, the supernatural, very different things, very different things. Or the UFO phenomena, and you notice I'm almost grading that as a continuum.
Hmm.
Very few people haven't, and most of the people either think it's a bit of a laugh. You see, interesting. Everyone thinks it's interesting, but not much more than that. And as I say, hardly anybody really wants to discuss it because it's either one of those things or it might get in the way of your next promotion.
If I
All
may,
right. Right.
I'd kind of like to go back to something that you said earlier. For me, it was a thought that or a perspective that I had never heard of before, and I thought it was quite interesting actually when you were talking about these abductions being more ritualistic in nature. Can you go into a little bit more detail about that? Because I find that pretty darn fascinating.
Right. If you've anyone that has a sort of ceremonial aspect to their lives, whether that's church going, you turn up, a certain ritual is performed in a particular way, and it's performed in a particular way. It's not crazy all guns blazing every week because certain things must be done to achieve a certain result. Like science, you do certain things to achieve a result. The scientist that's in his lab all the time is worth more respect and knows more than the scientist that's not. The monk that's praying and meditating all the time is worthy of more respect and will know his way around that arena than someone who isn't. Ritual is a part of human life. We ritualize things. I mean, in one of my poetry collections, I put down the provocative remark somewhere that man ritualizes, humankind ritualizes. It's one of the ways that we, as the sorts of creatures we are, make sense of the world around us. We organize and structure things through categorizing them, through interacting with them, sometimes repeatedly, sometimes irregularly. It's what we do as humankind. Because if I'm working on the rational basis that ET, whatever it is, must be more advanced than us, or at least more powerful than us, or at least have access to knowledge that we don't, why are they doing things in such a dumbass way? What is it you don't know? It's in every public library now. What is it you don't know about human anatomy? What's missing? What's missing from global geodesic surveys? What's missing for you? Go to a library. It's there. Now we must assume if we think it's all nuts and bolts and spaceships, so they got here, so they've got the ability to do that. So why do they suddenly drop the ball when they're here and they're acting like high school kids? Something else must be going on. So what is it? What is it? What is it? What is it? I suspect we need to get very esoteric all of a sudden. That human beings need to get Gnostic all of a sudden. Human beings aren't what people think they are. I think we've many bodies, all of which can be experienced. I love the Buddhist reaction to this, the Buddhist attitude. Don't trust me. Do the work and you'll achieve the results. You will see what I'm talking about. That is, again, that's a Gnostic attitude. I like that. You know, certain people think, including myself, that we have astral bodies, etheric bodies. I mean, my own esoteric teacher, Jesse Thompson, may the angels shine glory on him forever, wherever he is now. I met him at the Findhorn Foundation, the Findhorn community as it was then, in 1978, which dates me. Yes, I'm 66 this year, which is why I find mornings difficult. The old croc finds mornings difficult nowadays. You know, I mean, which was a magical place in those days, you know, before the New Age got a bad rep and before it became brainless. They were an experimental community looking for new ways of living with an organic, whole breathing environment, the earth around them. They were looking at new ways that humans could live. And they felt they were involving themselves with the devas, as they call them, a Hindu word, meaning the shining ones, in other words, higher intelligences, the blueprints, the angels, if you like, behind manifest things, behind plants and trees. Now, actually, weird things did happen. I mean, certainly the Peter Caddy and his wife, Eileen Caddy, I actually met Eileen Caddy a couple of years later. He was an esotericist. In Britain, it's always the Air Force. If you're looking for weirdos, you always go to the Air Force. You know, the flyboys, they've always got this other view of life. There's more to it than you think. He'd been in the army, but he was sort of linked with the Air Force in some weird way, and he was into Alice Bailey and all that stuff. And they were using some of those teachings and some of those meditation techniques. They were dirt poor. He'd been demobbed after the Second Great War. His career wasn't going well. Shame on all of us. People don't like veterans when they come back. Shame on all of us. You can go there and die, but you can't come back. You know, so Peter Caddy was having a very difficult time pinning down a job. He had a wife, he had kids. You know, was it on the way or kids? I can't remember. So they ended up in a caravan on a beach in Scotland with nothing. With him trying to get every job he could just to get some basic income. Eileen was the mystic, the seer, the channeler, to use that awful modern word, who was dealing with the world of devas. And she found herself talking to them about the problems they were having, which of course isn't a well-known meditation technique. She found herself interacting with these intelligents saying, you know, you wouldn't believe the problems we got at the minute. And all of a sudden, they've got a little allotment, as we call it here, a little patch where they grew some vegetables. It goes berserk, you know, mushrooms this size, tomatoes, where the devas are trying to give a helping hand to the caddies. Now, of course, you can't do things like that and it get unnoticed, which is why I don't go for all these conspiracy theories. The locals notice, you know, oh, what's happening there? You know, and then the local papers notice. Right, what are you putting then on these vegetables to make them so big? The BBC notices because the local papers have noticed. Therefore, the film crew start turning up with people having, you know, posing by these giant vegetables. Then the Soil Association turns up. You're putting evil chemicals onto this beach. What exactly are you doing, caddies? You know, so if it turns into a big row, that's when you know something's going on. A big row starts. About how they're interfering with the processes of nature. And then poor little Eileen says, actually, it's all to do with mystical forces. So Findhorn became this experimental community where they were working with nature. And, I mean, in esoteric terms, the next couple of levels are still nature, actually. You know, the etheric level, the astral level, they're still what you would call nature, although at a very high and refined level. It's still material, albeit at a very high and refined level. It's the etheric body that's the next one up. People get that the wrong way around, then the astral body, because that can detach itself a bit. So I think what you're looking at is these ETs interacting with us because they simply can't make head nor tail of us. Right, so you've got a body, right? You've got a body, you've got a mind, right? We can see that. We can see that. You've got emotions. Yeah, we like that. Have you noticed they all like the human capacity to feel? But hang on, you've got this other stuff. Now, what is that? You've got this etheric thing. You've got this electromagnetic web around you. Now, what on earth is that? Oh my God, then there's something else on top of that. What is this? Maybe they don't have it. Maybe we are the riddle for them and not the other way around at all.
Wow.
Now, in esoteric circles, we think there are 7 bodies because there are 7 basic planes of existence as we know them in the continuum. Please remember that bit, so no one isn't saying there isn't something more. As human beings, creatures like us know them. Most human beings, I think, have flashes of the etheric life, race memory, previous lives, if that's what you want to call them. We can argue about all of that stuff, when there's more time. Flashes of unusual moments, deja vu. That's when you kick in. That's when the etheric body kicks in. Do you remember? It's like sort of one of those Russian dolls with things inside it. You're the one in the middle, right? And there's all these other Russian dolls. And sometimes it doesn't fit together, right? Or people trying to fit it together in the wrong way. They've all got to align somehow. What is the purpose of the mystery schools? To get these bodies to align, not hide knowledge. If anything, they're desperate for more knowledge of how these things align. How do you consciously do that? So, that will flash in sometimes, maybe once or twice in a lifetime, unless you know what you're doing. The astral world will flash into you and you'll have these vast cosmic visions. Then it will be gone again in seconds and you won't know what it means and you think you're going mad. And suppose there are these other levels too. And we don't know what they are. Maybe some of the greatest initiates of the human race have known, but we don't. And our cultures don't. We hear rumors, we hear stories, we hear myths, but we don't know what these things are. We only hear about them in a circuitous fashion. Now, if ET is coming here and they've already mapped the human body, they've already done everything they can do, and they know what the world's like better than us, of course they would. But all of a sudden, there's this other stuff. So, you've got a worldly body. We can see it. Look, we're looking at it. We're poking it now. But what is all this? What is all this? How else would they deal with it unless it was in the context of a ritual? Therefore, if anything, you can see them mimicking what human beings do and not the other way around. They're trying to form a ritual context whereby other aspects of our humanity become accessible. I don't want to go into particular cases at the moment because I think that would take too long, but that would be my reading of, what was the great Mackie Mack, the great psychologist?
John
Mack, that was it. That is a tour de force, that book. Skeptics attack. I'm sorry, I thought skepticism was all about evidence, not a rival ideology. But whatever happened there, that went wrong. I can understand why they attack, albeit unfairly in this particular case. How many times have you got to say, I'm a practicing clinical psychologist? Believe it or not, how many times have I got to say, by the way, I'm a minister if I'm saying something to do with morality? It's just what human beings are like. Nobody's listening anymore. Everybody's talking, but nobody's listening. So, what he says as a clinical psychologist and someone drawing evidences from these experiences, I notice he's left with certain ritualistic question marks. And, I'm not the only person to say that. It does come up every now and again. And I notice people draw back from it very quickly. I don't, because of my interest in esotericism and because I don't think there's any other way of dealing with it. On brass tacks again. They must be dunderheads. What Dr. Smith in Lost in Space, one of my favourite programs as a kid. These bubble-headed boobies, as he used to say. But that's what they are. Unless there is a mystery they can't get their head around. And we're it. We're it.
That's fascinating.
Dun, 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 dun.
Wow.
I love that. I I I also please wanted to touch on the experience that you had at the school. Now, I don't know if you're aware, you may well be, that there was a similar incident here in this country, which is called the Westall UFO event, which occurred in 1966. There's the Ariel School event, which Dr. Johnny Mack was investigating. There's even YouTube videos of him interviewing children. Were you aware of this motif of these appearances at schools, or have you become aware of that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't sort of single that out as anything sinister. I notice in the UFO community, all of a sudden, they're looking for problems a lot of the time. Now they're spying on our kids. You know, then there's a roll of the drum, and you know, if what I've just said has any validity, that's most certainly not what they're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, that's one of the motifs in this grander narrative of ufology and this grander narrative of interaction with whatever this phenomena is. I mean, let me give you my year of awakening to UFOs, which wasn't that year. UFO is the wrong word. I mean, 1976, he dates himself again. So before I went to Findon, which this is one of the reasons I went to Findon, was my summer of interacting with balls of light. It was non-stop. Other people sometimes saw them. I'll give you a story. It all started one night. I was working. We lived in a place called Fareham in Hampshire, rural southern English community, very very pleasant. They had a bungalow towards the periphery of the community. I used to have to take. Notice the wording. I used to have to take my mother's dog out every night. I didn't want to do it. I don't know how many times I said I don't want to do it, but I had to do it. And I was walking down this badly lit road because the council didn't want to spend much of its money on local lighting. But a countryside area, you can see a pub in the distance, it being Britain, but you can't see much else. And all of a sudden, I mean, I've noticed that as a motif. When something is about to happen, when you're involved with these higher intelligences, you always know slightly before it happens. All of a sudden, I knew I had to look up for no reason. I looked directly above myself, and there were two balls of orange light connected at a tangent with each other, zooming down from the highest reaches of the sky to me. And I thought, oh my God, it's going to crash into me. They suddenly do a U-turn and shoot them out, and they're gone. And that was the first, oh God, I hate talking about me, but I think it's important. The first instance of a summer of events. I mean, it was non-stop, literally. Hasn't happened since. The most memorable one, one of the most memorable ones, I'll give you two quickly, was you could sort of sense when they were turning up before they turned up. At least it got to that stage with me. I knew there was a ball of light behind me. It wasn't there visibly. Brilliant white light, slight sort of bluish tinge to it around the edges. And I challenged it. I said, in my mind, walking the bloody dog, look, if you're there, I'm sorry, you've got to prove yourself. You're just psychological. I can go along with that, but you're just psychological. Prove it. What happened was about 30 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet above my head, this comet shot in front of me, leaving a trail behind it, which tapered into a number of colors. Now, remember, the road is dark. There's a pub in the area. There are trees. There was a courting couple. That phrase dates me as well. Underneath one of the trees. I don't know what they were up to, but they were exchanging addresses. He said, be very English. And forgive me for my French for the minute. I heard the girl say, what the was that? In that tone, it shot past them and disappeared. So not only do you have an interaction between me and whatever this intelligence was, you have it answering my question and proving its presence by having other people involved in this scenario. The one that finally ended it after a couple of months over the summer was, again, I saw this ball of light, broad daylight this time, at a distance, slightly the other side of the pub. And it did almost what the original phenomenon had done. It was curling upwards, and it was going very strangely slowly. No aircraft could have done that. It was too slow. I mean, the aircraft wouldn't have been able to fly. slowly going upwards, and it suddenly generated a series of colours around itself. Now, it wasn't Roy G. Biv. It wasn't the normal spectrum. Do you know, how can you tell genuine UFO guys sometimes? Because they never bloody write things down when they're meant to. Why didn't I write it down? The arrangement of colours was different. I knew Jesse. No, sorry. Yes, that was I can't remember who I have to remember who I asked. Forgive me. And you know, I don't, because it was someone involved in the esoteric, but it wasn't him. Does this mean anything to you when, you know, a ball of light goes up into the sky slowly and all these colours are generated? And he said, well, of course it does. You know, it's raising its vibrational level to get wherever it came from. And it had to go through that series to be able to get back to where it came from. And I think that was exactly the same series of colours the comet that night was generating in the trail of the comet. So, gosh, I mean, I don't know where to go with that one. Apart, right, I'll give you one other story. Findhorn. Why was Findhorn so important to me in those days? And which is why it remains an initiatic moment for me. Jesse and I were both there. As I say, I met him there. I'm getting with my time this morning. Hey, it's before my normally get up time. I need my coffee. Be nice and generous. I live BC, before coffee, and it's not human. It's not human. So we got chatting to someone called Dick Barton, special agent, who actually had been working at the experimental Air Force base up there. I can't remember offhand, forgive me, whether it was American or British. I mean, don't forget, it's all hand in glove in this country anyway, so it doesn't matter. He'd been an experimental jet pilot, so not a silly boy. And he was, before he moved to the community with his family, an incredible story. Where he'd been flying so high up in the atmosphere, but that was in those days. What are they doing now? So high up in the atmosphere, basically, even military technology was only beginning to experiment with how you did that. And according to him, a beam of energy shot from the Earth right past his aircraft, and it sent it into a dive. You know, all systems out, all systems back on. And he said it took him all of his expertise as numero uno experimental jet pilot to get it back under control. And yet, how do you tell when stories are real? A row starts. Were the military authorities pleased when he got back? No, they were livid. What on earth was going on then? Do you know how much that aircraft cost? What were you doing? Apparently he was in debriefing for nearly 2 days, trying to defend himself against all these accusations. Did he do what most military people actually really did? He told them. I don't want to talk about that. So they wrote it down, but they didn't want to talk about it. But it set him off on a journey. He got out a local map of the area, worked out that was where the Findhorn community was. It's based, at least they would have said in those days, on an earth chakra. He went there, he visited it, he loved the place. He wanted to move in. His wife thought he'd gone berserk. So did the family. He sold up his property. They all moved in. He became one of the leading lights of the community. Now, this is the story that ET people might like the best. Years later, you know, when everyone's happy, they're all experimenting with new ways of interacting with the Earth. He gets very, very ill and he's dying one night. His wife has gone to a community meeting and he dies, but he's an esotericist. Remember, it's always the flyboys. His different bodies they start separating out as he's dying. And he finds himself in the next body up, floating upwards. Now, that's the psychology of the 23rd century, I think, when we've got that under wraps. And all of a sudden, he's in a spaceship above the community, above the Earth. And there are these beings inside it, and they're just not interested that he's there. And he tries to make himself interesting to them. And one of them stares, I think he said, you know, whatever. You know, there's a monkey in the room, whatever. And all of a sudden he realizes it's not a spaceship. It's a crystalline space-time wave. I'm quoting him and paraphrasing. Some of the answers today, believe it or not, I'm paraphrasing, which is why they come out weirdly. Do forgive me. It's a time wave, space-time wave between him and the system Sirius. And actually, it's a bridge which lots of different entities are using for their own purposes. And finally, he gets people to talk to, because most of the others, he would have said, remember, that's his story, not my story. I mean, they're so advanced, they don't take an interest in us. They're doing their own thing, man. You know, he finally gets some beings on his, more or less on his level, and they're all very matter of fact. I mean, that's what interested me in the story. Look, you're not dying. You know, something's gone wrong. Your wife's already back, and the doctor's there. I mean, they don't need to worry. And as he wants to ask them all these questions about the universe, he finds himself being pulled back down into his body, and he's already in the local hospital. I find that intriguing. I mean, does that answer the question, old Stuart? I mean,
Yeah, that was amazing. In fact, one of the things I was going to mention today was, and for anyone who's watching this, if you Google the words, if you Google NASA and portal, it'll lead you to some work from the University of Iowa talking about portals between Earth and the sun. I was going to talk to you about portals, and you mentioned about chakras. I mentioned that relates to ley lines. I find all that. And you mentioned a stone circle in your area too, which I found very interesting.
well, I'll just finish off one point about kids being monitored. I don't think they're being monitored. If some of these beings are so far ahead of us, they may not even be interested in us. That's us all being drama queens. Look, I'm here. Look, pay attention. Maybe they're just not bothered with us. Maybe their level of consciousness is so far ahead, they deal with planets or systems, you know, solar systems, not individual human beings. I love the idea of ley lines simply because the esoteric part of me knows that the Earth is a living being, the Gaia hypothesis. I mean, that's science nowadays. You know, the argument is it a conscious being or not? You know, is it the whole of it a being, you know, the rocks beneath, or is it just the biosphere over the rocks? I mean, those are good arguments, actually. You know, so that's a being. So what you're looking at, I suppose, if human beings have chakras, which, you know, I like the Sufis when they talk about chakras, when they talk about those wheels of energy. They're there, but they're not there. You know, so they're not, you know, if you talk to some New Age people, they're like sort of organs in the body. Actually, I think they are organs in the astral body, but they're not organs in our body. But, you know, they're theoretical, and we haven't got the types of instrument to be able to work out what they are yet, or even if they're there yet. That doesn't bother the Sufis. The Sufis says, look, your Sufis, the schools of Sufis say, yeah, it's there, but it's not there. And does that really matter? Because you're working with the imagination, that terrible word in certain circles. You're working with creativity. You're working with, you know, your potentials on a psychological level. Work with that. So if we have them, why wouldn't the Earth have them, even if it's only on a theoretical level? And those are ley lines, of course. You know, Alfred Watkins and the Old Straight Track, wonderful book, read it years ago. I mean, being British, it used to be an excuse to go on country walks sometimes and play some cricket and get zonked in a local pub. You know, don't be too het up about it all. It's a lovely thing to do. So yeah, I'm convinced ley lines are there. This stuff about stargates. So what is it you think is new in that type of narrative, right? That it can be called a stargate instead of something else. Oh my God, the minute you think it can be called something else, everyone's been talking about it forever. You know, and I hate the fantasy that tries to interfere with these types of worlds. I mean, if I see one more still from the movie Stargate being hawked on the social media as an actual discovery, I will start screaming. You know, it's a movie. It's a movie. You know, there was one group on Facebook the other day that showed a picture of the Jupiter 2. Hey, I loved Lost in Space. So the Robinson family finally made it back to Earth then, because certainly that's not a UFO. That's a clip of the Jupiter 2 from Lost in Space. You know, all this has to stop because it's brainless. It's a bit, right, it's a bit of fun, I admit that. But it's brainless. And if we're taking this seriously at all, not with a populist attitude, but with a level of brevity, then there's no need for that. You know, either this stuff is real or it's not. If you think it's real, then hey, what are we dealing with? Isn't that interesting? There's no need for all that nonsense. Stargates have been here forever because if the Earth is a living being, so is the sun, the solar logos. the solar logos actually embraces the entire system, whether we remember that or not, basic physics. Oh, all this threads and quantum bollocks. Let's talk about interesting physics that we all know and we can all agree on. So the solar being embraces everything that he has created in solar winds, in magnetic and gravitational forces. So we're all one being. It has chakras. They are known, in some circles at the moment, as stargates. The end.
Love it. That was good.
Wow.
I think I'm making Mike yawn.
No. It's 2 a.m. here. I'm just
Sorry, Mike.
no worries. I've got 2 questions, if I may, because I just wanted to. The first one being, what would you say is the overall consensus of just the general population of the UK and what they think about ET and UFOs?
Well, knowing everyone in the UK, I can honestly say, well, no,
from your perspective, right?
They don't think about anything apart from getting to Benidorm and drunk twice a year. They don't think about things full stop. That's the UK. That's why people like me have got an uphill struggle constantly. If there was something like a collective opinion above anything apart from cheap lager and what the best deal was in a local chicken house, or Lidl as the cheapest supermarket, if there was any level of mentation above that, which I'm highly sceptical of, yeah, I think most people just think there are UFOs, there we are. I think, it's rather like gay stuff. Society has had the debate already. It's made its decisions and moved on. I don't go for all this disclosure stuff, particularly in America. Forgive me for being cheeky for one moment. Any day now, it's happened. It's happened. Most people think they're ETs. It's happened. What more do you want to happen? It's already done. We've already decided. Most people think there are ETs. Now the evil Dodd is coming up with evidence because it doesn't want to be unfashionable. We like being gay. Everyone had a big row in Victorian times and Edwardian times. Oh my God, they're human. Let's move on and do something else. No, I don't think there's any shock or horror. I think I don't normally count myself as a member of the ufology community, not because I hate them, because I'm not really active in those scenes, at least at the minute. I'm not really part of the paranormal community, not because I don't think I'm active. Well, I'm not active, because I'm not really part of it all. There's this sort of, for career reasons normally, I will bring the crushing blow and reveal all. And normally it's something that somebody said 20 years ago anyway. No, we've all decided, is all this stuff going on? Yes. What is it? We don't know. And we've got on with stuff. I think for ufology to become relevant, for me, it's losing its relevancy at the minute. And numbers are dropping, rather like the church. It's got to grow up a bit, like the church. These are important, serious questions about what we are as human beings. And these energies, these forces have... they intrude. That is the word I want to use. They intrude into our lives. What does it mean? Are we safe? If we are safe, what does that mean? Are they there on our side? Are they there against us? Is it a mixture of the two? These are really serious, important questions. Is American airspace no longer inviolable? That's actually a crucial question. Does China or Russia have a technology that we don't know about? I bet that's going on as well. Why don't we know about it? Why aren't people discussing it? Oh my God, they could launch satellite missiles above us. The fact that the DoD isn't engaging in that, I find incredibly interesting. But largely it's because it doesn't know how to respond to a narrative that's already happened and we're already looking at new things. Ufology for me will come of age when experiencers stop asking and answering the same questions, which we've been doing now for at least 20 years.
Interesting. That almost makes my next question moot.
I look forward to it anyway, Mike.
I'm going to ask it anyway. Because, I think a lot of people, at least in America, maybe other places too, they sort of need to be told, and whether it's by the government or one of their religious leaders or such, that this is real and true before they actually accept or believe it. That's my opinion anyway. And with that, I've heard sort of some whispers that the UK is right now, as we're talking, in the process of sort of getting ready to make their own disclosure to preemptively, beat America to the punch. And earlier you were talking about how Britain always wants to sock it to America. What are your thoughts on that? I don't know if that is necessarily true or not, but if it were to be true, what do you think about that?
I hope we beat the Yanks to the punch. That's what I say. Rule Britannia. No, I don't go for any of it. Nick Pope, very good guy. Lots of interesting things to say. He knows as well as I do what the national discourse is here. He knows as well as I do. Do people want to be led? No, they're just badly educated. This is getting me into politics now, be careful. They're badly educated. They don't have many opportunities in life. If you're working 6 jobs to keep body and soul together, the question of UFOs is not going to be at the top of your list. The ruling elites, do I think they're elites and cabals? Yes, but they're nothing to do with the esoteric world. The ruling political elites are very happy, thank you, with the way things are. They don't want to be questioned. They don't want to be challenged. Have another job. Have another job and go to Benidorm 3 times a year. They don't want certain discourse to take place because it means we're all human and we're thinking beings and we've got a bit of self-respect and we can get on with life. Do I believe any type of narrative and discourse is openly squashed? I'm sorry, no, I don't. I think if anything, it reflects the sad level of most people's lives nowadays, whereby they're struggling, all guns blazing, to keep the family unit together, to pay the mortgage, to get the car going. Groceries are going through the roof. Bills are now astronomical, particularly in Britain. Nobody's even addressing those issues on a political level. That's what people are worried about. By the way, now we're in the pub. Do you think UFOs affect your life? Sod off. What do you expect people to say? But as I say, I think the narrative has already adjusted itself. At the back of their minds, yes. The new question is, what's that got to do with me? Right? So it's a religious question. If I turn up talking about our gracious and glorious Lord, nowadays they won't know what they've got to worship, what worship is, or why they should do it. If anything, the questions have become much more fundamental because of what's happening on a cultural and political level. In America in the 50s, there was nothing unusual to have a sole earner, a single income family, whereby you had a reasonably large house, a car, and you had, your fridge was full of food. That's a rarefied phenomenon now. In Britain, that was never even the case. I think UFO people, the paranormal people, more than the UFO people, seriously let themselves down when they sort of pretend all that's not happening. Like it doesn't interfere with the questioning process. Why wouldn't it? It interferes with the questioning process on every other level of life. Why wouldn't it there? And that's when the people who either want to make a career, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, or they want to, just be a pain in the arse, like the people introducing fantasy, open fantasy into it all, which can be funny. Yes, I know. Or they're careerists, as I say, carving out a niche for themselves. And I'm not even necessarily against that. Hey, the other hat I wear is theatrical. All us girls have to earn a living. So, I can understand that too. But, if anything, it diminishes the seriousness of the debate to pretend all those things aren't facets of people's lives. And that's why it's not the burning issue. The burning issue is, am I going to be in a job this time next year? Can I pay the mortgage? What will it mean for my family if I'm suddenly made redundant? Those are the burning issues in society, excuse me, as we've ham-fistedly constructed it at the moment. We're going back into the medieval period. massive, overwhelming superstitions, which, of course, in those days, the churchmen, of course, were scholars and doing their best to fight it through reason and study and naturalism. They were actually doing their best to fight it in those days. So massive superstitions serving a cultural elite that will basically stop at nothing to preserve their power. And what stopped that? Society. All these servants and serfs and, I mean, they weren't slaves at that time. Aren't we all wage slaves? I'm trying to avoid it, but aren't we all? All of these people came along, and all of a sudden, maybe you had one of your servants who had more money than you did because he was involved in trade. All these bloody Israelites turning up and causing banks to occur. What's their problem, right? And on a social level, oh my God, he's running a business. He's got more money than me, but he's meant to be my servant. Society adjusted itself, whereby democracy, for a while at least, became the only alternative. There was no sensible way of doing business unless it was done that way. Now, we need some sort of reformation in that type of way amongst ourselves. At the moment, we're going backwards, which is why ufology, religion, spirituality, the New Age is all on the decrease and on the, it's going backwards simply because, and I believe it's half manipulated, by the way, simply because the existential is being exaggerated, and human beings are human beings. If I work three jobs I hate and I'm doing it for my family, I want 2 weeks away in the sunshine to let off steam, get drunk, make an arsehole of myself, have a bit of fun before I go back to that prison. That's the problem plaguing us all. And therefore, UFOs have a political dimension, maybe, that no one's even thought of or is seriously addressing, not simply with the evil Dodd manipulating information, but helping manipulate all of us into a position whereby these questions never achieve relevancy. I probably put my foot in half a dozen buckets with that one.
No, that was fine. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're dealing with the lower levels of the hierarchy and not the upper ones. And you were trying to say potentially by design.
As I say, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, although I do on this particular level. If people are looking for real conspiracies, they're in front of us. And it's all to do with the banks and the corporations. It's not to do with this weird cabal of misfits that think they've got the upper edge, they've got the thumb over somebody else. It's not that. I mean, there was a scandal and a conspiracy in this country which is still unpacking to do with our post office system. Paula Venables is an evil woman. She's an ordained Church of England vicar. They can't resist. Choose the wrong people. I wouldn't get through those selection panels. I asked too many questions. She got through. She was the CEO of the British Post Office. There was a glitch in their tech. They knew there was a glitch in their tech. It didn't stop them prosecuting local postmasters for embezzlement, because the image of the post office has to be more important than somebody's life. You're joking. Some people committed suicide. About 30 people went to jail, and she's telling Parliament she doesn't know what they're talking about. Everything's great, and using public money to hire lawyers to prosecute people she knows are innocent in the first place. Is there a conspiracy? That's a real prime example of one. By the elite, and they're throwing out of the walls at the minute because they don't want other questions asked. Conspiracies are happening all around us, and it's normally to do with money and power, not knowledge. My God, that must be a battle for the future where we're all fighting about certain rarefied facts. That's not now. We're being enslaved by what seems to be happening. A personal opinion is that there's a certain Eric Fromm, I think, who came up with this sort of thing. They want a simplified humanity with a certain range of needs, not needs too low down and not needs too high up, which is sort of semi-autonomous. A born consumer that will go to war when they want it to, But, don't ask questions, keep consuming, keep relatively happy. Don't worry your little heads about all this UFO stuff. What's it got to do with you and your life? It's a narrowing down to suit certain vested interests because they simply don't want an articulate, empowered human condition whereby we can hold these scholarly debates and talk about us as real human beings in communities of real human beings, because then the old medieval systems, the old hierarchies fall apart. That's what's going on at the minute, in my humble opinion.
Interesting. Wow.
Oh dear, I've stunned everyone into silence. I'm sorry.
Well, Stuart, what do you say to that? I mean, that's, I kind of think that's right
That
on
was
the
good.
nose, but...
Well, I didn't know about that post office issue.
Oh, yeah, me neither.
It's quite upsetting.
When people are dead, do you know she had this sheer audacity and gall? The lawyers have got hold of it now. She had to sit in front of a public inquiry and lie, and they caught her out lying as she's giving her evidence, as she's giving her testimony. And so her lawyer said she's in denial. Love, darling, you're in such a state of denial. You've got to a new level of denial. This needs to make the clinical books. It's just because she's in that elite bubble at the top. She simply cannot be wrong. And why are all these people questioning her? Why? Because at least one person is dead. Hundreds have had their lives ruined. And, at least 30 people have been to jail. That is why.
Wow.
Dang.
And we all know the government's on our side and looking after us.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Well, just for the heck of it, let's, because this is sort of where we're trying to go from the start, in a way. It's probably not coming out right, but so Reverend David, what would you say to any spiritual leader across the world who sees this episode and about this topic in terms of speaking open? Thank you so much for speaking so incredibly openly about it with us. But what would you say to the world of the various denominations out there in terms of being open to talking about the topic?
I'm not sure every spiritual leader is against the topic. I seem to remember, obviously there are certain reasons why I don't get on too well with evangelicals, particularly American ones. However, one of my heroes, believe it or not, was Chuck Missler, who, what a guy. Incredible, in-depth knowledge of the Bible, a very fine preacher. I put his humanity down to the fact he had an ordinary job working in the information industry for years, who would talk about UFOs all the time and had some very, very interesting things to say. He tends to have seen it. No, I hate talking for people. I think he tends to have seen it as sort of more interdimensional on that sort of level. And he would have said quite clearly, what of Christianity, one of the things Christians have been talking about forever is ufology. The fact, any Christian that denies there's life out there hasn't read the Bible. There are all these entities floating around doing stuff. Where do you think they are? Where do you think they're from? I'd even argue that there are instances in the Bible where you can talk about a UFO phenomena, not the Von Daniken stuff. Ezekiel and the vision of wheels between wheels. I'm sorry, the rabbis knew what he was talking about, and they wrote about it at length. No, they're not talking about machines. They're talking about the great wheel of the day, in the week, in the month, in the year, and the years circling and the aeons circling. And only a god can ride a chariot like that. That's what they're talking about. The macabre means chariot of God, and it means something poetic and metaphysical. It doesn't mean lots of little grey guys milling about and swapping maps, and it doesn't mean that. And you can misuse the word and misappropriate the word, fine, do whatever you want, but that's the origin of the story, and the rabbis wrote about it. And the fact that it was discussed in many cultures, his unique vision. Some say it was even discussed amongst the Druids. It's not true there was no communication across the globe in those days. It just took a lot longer, right? Ideas from China were discussed in Rome because of the Silk Route. There's this modern myth in the pejorative sense that everyone was huddled in their village, afraid to move. There's something called international trade, which has been forever. So no, what did the elite of Rome love wearing? Chinese silks. Who did they buy them from? The Chinese. So that's gone on forever. I think like most, I'm not against every single evangelical. A lot of them are fully aware that all this stuff is alluded to. As I say, unlike the Von Danikins of the world, who is clutching at straws to prove a point. More power to you, Eric, but it's really, really, really quite poor of you. And I remember reading him when I was a kid. I'm sorry, how old is Eric Von Daniken? I was at school when I read one of your books. By God, man. And yeah, I like him as a pioneer, and he didn't deserve all the hassle that he got. And there's nothing wrong with a different opinion, so all that's good. But I think because he's meant to have a knowledge of the Bible. I mean, if he has a knowledge of the Bible, he must know, because those stories cross-reference with other stories in Scripture. So he must know that, and he must know it can't refer to those things. And there are real reasons why. And particularly because I think there are instances in the Bible where you can say we might be looking at that type of intrusion. I mean, for the last 4 years, I ran something called the Nephilim Anthropology Conference. We've stopped it now for money. We ran out of money. We had some incredible speakers. We had some incredible venues. None of the churches would get behind us. We couldn't keep our audience. I mean, my partner and I moved from London. 40 years of living in London is a life sentence. I've done my time. So we had to move to this idyllic Scottish island for sanity. Because whatever's happening in London at the moment is certainly not that sane. So we're in this idyllic environment now. We tried to relocate it up here. It didn't really work. And we worked out, we could, people have to be paid. A lot of people, we couldn't afford to give a speaker's fee, but we could cover costs, which is the minimum, I think, any serious organization could do. We realized with the attendance we held the fourth conference last year at the Glasgow Theosophical Society, reasonable turnout, but some people have the village mentality of the internet too. Do you know, we were actually told by some of our followers in London, we can't book an online ticket, it's too far away. You're joking, right? So that's why you can't trust, burning questions being juggled in the minds of the ordinary people, because they've got their minds somewhere else. So we decided enough was enough, sadly, because I think we were beginning to get somewhere. I mean, certainly my dear friend Mike Ricksecker was going to be one of the speakers this year, so I've had to apologize to him. Believe it or not, some evangelical friends of mine. So that was shocking too. Oh my God, do I name them? They were going to come over and stay with us for a couple of days. And we were going to show them around the island. And my dear friend was going to, I'm not sure I should mention him at the minute, was going to speak with a biblical view, the Christian view of ufology. And, I think you're looking for, so, it's not true that everyone hates each other, real life is more complicated. But, I thought we were getting somewhere. The one story in the Bible that you could say really does look like ET intrusion, of course, is the story relating to the Nephilim. And it begins in the heavens. It begins with the angels, those that could fly above, or those who fly above. That is not the description, of course, of any entity known to the likes of us. I notice certain translations are loath to use the word angeloi, but angel seems to be the best description. Greek is it's this incredible descriptive language, which is why translators have trouble with it. It's not like German or not like Latin, laser beams. This means this means that. But you end up losing lots of stuff along the way. That's why nobody likes tackling Greek translation. Those who fly above. So, okay, you're dealing with something either angelic or like angelic, something from higher realms to us. that somehow, I mean, I think it's Jude, St. Jude, that cryptically refers to it in the actually, in the bit after the Gospels, in the apocryphal writings. Don't throw them out. They're treasure troves. They're treasure troves of knowledge, particularly for Gnostics.
Yep.
He's saying those angels that didn't keep their first estate but fell. Oh, so something can go wrong up there as well. I mean, a Gnostic would never believe that the highest levels anything can go wrong because it's perfect.
That's right.
But there are lots of levels, as I hope that's the one thing I've got over today. People like me will say there are lots of levels in the middle between here, which isn't the worst, and up there, and they don't commit evil in any sense. The Gnostic bit of me coming out, they don't commit evil in the sense of moral evil or criminal evil, because that really belongs to the human world. I mean, errors can creep into those systems because they're not the highest, and the error eventually filters down and becomes what we know as evil. So these advanced, vast intelligences, they're not flat. Artistic representations of angels are beautiful, but that's not what the word means. And nobody ever thought it meant that. Grow up. These intelligences somehow get off kilter. And one of the interesting questions amongst the rabbis I hear was, did they do it to each other? Are they sort of pursuing a route they shouldn't have pursued? Are they unbalancing each other in some way, some way we can't fathom? I mean, that's an interesting question. Are higher intelligences capable of unsettling each other in a negative way? So eventually, of course, they or something related to them descends to the earth, and strange biblical stuff. They saw the daughters of men and that they were comely. So they've come down for a Benidorm type experience. They've come down for a bit of rumpo. They're having a day off, heavenly realms, and it's actually, of course, their offspring, which is forbidden. They are still angels. An angel is an angel, even if it's a fallen angel. It's an angel, not a demon, not a demonic power. Those are different things. An angel may be a wicked angel, but it is still and always an angel. And which is why those particular angels in the Apocrypha, if you keep reading, are now in a condition and world even lower than Hades, where they're in perpetual imprisonment until the day, Judgment Day. It used to be, in mystical terms, it's called the day of Be With Us, when everything is revealed to everybody. In other words, when spirit has aligned with everything. That's what that means. So they're in Tartarus, not being punished, that's not yet, but in prison, so they can no longer interfere with anything, which is, as I say, as far below Hades. I think it was Chuck Missler that he was quite good at those things, that said, it was far below Hades as we are below the sun and further, an unimaginable distance. It's their offspring, of course, which are the abominations, a curious word used by translators, which must mean, Hebrew is quite difficult, Aramaic is quite difficult too, because it's using a couple of linguistic norms which we actually don't use in Western languages, and yada, yada. It must mean, I suppose, in the way we use it, as something like a disgusting thing. So you're looking at something moral. But the Nephilim, the giants, the old men of renown, they're the disgusting things. They're the abominations, and they're the ones that wage war on humanity. So the forbidden offspring of this forbidden union, they're the ones that actually go around creating nausea and inviting all sorts of problems with the sorts of tech we don't have access to, with access to other worlds that we don't have access to, because there's an angelic component to their nature. So that's when flying saucers, I did use that word deliberately, when, in other words, those types of phenomena that ufologists are interested in, that's a direct entry through biblical scripture into that world. And there are others. Is it a big issue in scripture? No, it's not, apart from the fact that, it does want to alert people to the fact there are beings, positive and negative, out there, and they're interacting amongst themselves and with us. I take a very Tibetan Buddhist view on all of that. There's the beginner, the tyro, the learning month, starts his journey, and through the power of his meditations, all this weird stuff starts happening, and he's generating telekinesis and all the rest of it. And any senior monk that knows his business will give him a good slap. I'm sorry, you're being taken off the route to salvation. Is it all fascinating? Of course it is. Is it amazing? Great. But you're now no longer focusing on enlightenment. You're focusing on something else. So are you a monk or not? Right. That's the attitude of the scriptures. Are you becoming one with the Savior? Are you aligning yourself with the will of the Almighty? That's the concern of religious writings, not technology, not even the sciences, not even history. Are you aligning yourself with the continuum? That's the interest of sacred writings across the earth. So to get back to that, I think most people accept it. There's no real issue. And we've all got to do better, as it used to say on the bottom of report cards for lazy students in England.
That was beautiful how you focused on what the true message is. And I felt a bit not attacked, but it struck at the very heart of this podcast, because you're like, basically, Stuart, why are you bothering your time about ETs? You should be focusing on becoming like the Savior.
Oh my God, I've upset you both. That was the first thing away from my mind.
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. It was good. I just got a slap around the face from the elder monk right then.
Not too old, watch it. No, I mean, even that's the wrong. Yeah, even with the deepest way, even that's the wrong thing. I mean, what the elder monk wouldn't say was, it's completely wrong because it is opening your mind. What the elder monk would say is, that's not the end of the story. Can you please remember that?
Good.
That was why I'm at odds with the paranormal community in Britain constantly. I don't doubt all this stuff is happening. And for me, the interesting question is whether it's psychological or not, which, of course, as we said earlier, doesn't mean it's imaginary.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is, whether they want to admit that or not. And that's when a decent argument really starts. But,
so, Reverend Dave, thank you so much for chatting with us. Truly, I knew that I was going to enjoy it, but I didn't think I was going to enjoy it this much. You are awesome. So we're going to put some information about you on our website, and but where can people find out? Do you have like your own website or social media or anything where people maybe can reach out to you if they want to?
Well, they can find me by the fact I'm here. I can't resist a gag. I'm sorry. That's the showbiz side. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, I'm forced against my better will to be on most social media platforms. What's social media apart from one global poison pen letter? But so I'm forced to be on that despite my better judgment. I've got LinkedIn. I've got my own website, which needs massively updating. I'm available. I answer my own emails. I've got a LinkedIn. I don't have a secretary. I probably wouldn't have a secretary even if I could afford one, because I like interacting with people. The big mystery for me is people, because there's something divine in human nature. I'm accessible. I'm about, and I live on the Isle of Bute with my wonderful partner, and it's not a big place. You can probably see me doing shopping or catching the local ferry to the mainland. I'm here.
Okay, great. You have a play coming out too soon, right?
I actually see myself as a cleric in a theatrical. I know, so maybe at some point we've got to do the theatre, David. This is. I mean, my first book, my first collection of poetry is actually Caliban's Redemption, which is a bit of a giveaway. So my poetry was always for performance. It was also always to be read aloud. It was never to be, when it's a cold, blustery day and you've got a pot of tea in front of you and you're reading a little book of poetry, and I've done that myself. But it was never meant to be that. It was always meant to be much more experimental and a contribution to British performance. What is it? Every nation has its own genius. What do the British do when they're at their best? Drama and history. You don't come here to be a philosopher or an engineer. You go to Germany. That's what they're good at. If you want to be a sociologist or fashion designer, go to France. That's what they're good at. But the British are good at theatre. They're good at history, and there's a sort of mixture there. So theatre's been part of my life forever. This is actually my second play. My first play, I've got loads of them. I've just never seen the opportunity to bring them out. You know, in theatre's different from writing a novel or pure poetry. You know, you've got to work with other people, whether you like them or not. I hate actors. I hate actors. You know, so you're working with a group, an ensemble, and it wasn't until my dear friend Victor Sobchak, who is the best Russian impresario in the country at the moment, who managed to escape the KGB during the old Soviet Union. That's when you've got guts. You know, because he's a free thinker and he wanted to put on all these plays and they didn't like it. Long story. An incredible guy that's toured the world with performances. You know, Kafka, all the people, Beckett. He's putting all of them on, and he's now working closely with me, so I'm very honoured. He had admired another collection of mine called The Grammar of Witchcraft, which we actually first put on a couple of years ago. He put in the apparatus, theatrical apparatus, you know, who stands where, changing of scenes and so on, changing of acts. We played in the Camden Fringe Festival, and we also played in the Edinburgh Festival. So this is actually the second opportunity I've had to have staged a work of mine. It's called Women in Mayhem. Excuse me. I suppose, I mean, this should grab you both. In terms of theatre, I suppose I'm an absurdist. I find absurdism, I think absurdism and nihilism, more absurdism, are actually deeply misunderstood. If you've got your back against the wall, as more and more of us do nowadays, what is it you actually believe? Is there anything you believe in? That's absurdism. You know, the economy is falling around us. China's trying to become the new world power. We can't afford our rent. We can't afford food. What can we afford? So our backs are getting against the wall. Absurdism is the only response theatrically to the sort of social conditions we currently live in. Therefore, it will be staged as part of the Camden Fringe Festival. We've already had a preview, which did very, very well with some of the more serious critics. Not all of them are nowadays. We're staging it at the Etc. Theatre between the 21st, forgive me, and 25th of August. It's full of laughs. It's full of crazy stuff. Can't resist. And it's also examining, how about this? What is a woman? We all hear so much about it nowadays. What is a woman? And if there is something to being called a woman, what is a man? If there is something that's not simply genitalia, what is it? And how do we understand it? And is it for our betterment? So, all of which is probably yes. You know, so we're looking at three very serious scenarios. Women placed in different worlds, different times, different interactions, in the wider framework of absurdism, where, you know, we probably don't live in a crazy universe, but what sort of universe do we live in? Does this mean anything? If it does mean something, what does it mean? So we're having our first run with that, as I say, in August. Hopefully we can bring it to Scotland next year. You might find this very strange. I'm not a huge fan of the Edinburgh Festival because it's too ideological nowadays. I mean, you two would have trouble as well as me. They now like asking what you're going to perform. Sorry, this is meant to be about the free flow of creativity, not what tourists like. By the way, tourists like coming to the free flow of creativity and not knowing what they're in for. That's why they keep going. So now there are guidelines issued by the Borough Council about what you can do and what you can't do, which is why I'm rapidly going off Edinburgh. But yeah, hopefully the new play is up and running for the foreseeable future. And I'm already planning, because Victor wants to launch another play of mine next year, which is a direct attack upon Benidorm and that mindset. So yeah, theatrical David is up and running, and I hope making a bit of a dent in a world I've loved and admired for all of my life. There's nothing unusual in a priest and a playwright being in the same body in Britain. That's part of our heritage. It's part of our tradition. Don't know about other parts of the world, but it's one of the glories of here. So that's us. That's what we're up to.
Wow, thank you. More power to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. It was a pleasure meeting you. Definitely appreciate it. And yeah, if you ever want to come back again and talk some more, I think that your energy is going to be really good for this topic because I think we do need some laughs about it too.
I'd be deeply honoured and blessed if you ever invite me back. And Stuart knows I don't say things like that unless I mean them.
Yeah.
I don't speak with forked tongue. You take me as you find me. I've loved the show. I love both of you. Stuart's an old friend of mine anyway. If you ever want me back, I'd be more than delighted. Don't get me wrong. I don't think these subjects are unimportant. If anything, I think they're vitally important. But what's going wrong for me is the context within which these things are being framed is itself now falling apart. And that isn't, it came into the Nephilim Anthropology Conference. There's no need to run it now. People don't have the money or the energy to contribute. And shame on all of us, because these are interesting questions, but it simply can't go ahead where I'm looking after our speakers. Churches are falling apart. I mean, look at the figures. Christianity's falling apart around our ears. Who do we blame? Ourselves. What is it we're not meeting? If Christianity's true and love and wisdom are built into the fabric of the universe, I can't imagine anything more mind-blowing. And who's saying that? Apart from Stuart and me, who's saying that? So, we have to be aware of the context of things. I think our civilization, and I do mean on that grandiose level with a capital C, Western civilization in itself is falling apart at the moment. Do we really want alternatives to take our place, where there's no such thing as liberal philosophy, where there's no such thing in a right and a wrong in the sense that we know it? I'll give you one more story, then we'll round it off. A dear friend of mine is Sultan Rev, who is the assistant to the presidential assistant in Kyrgyzstan. He's also a very, 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 very good playwright. I went round the last time I was there to his house for supper with his good lady wife and family, with the greatest poet in Russia at that particular time, Mikhail Sinilnikov. And when you're not asking questions, but people have got something to say, just listen, don't intrude. I mean, Mikhail said to me, "We'll never forgive the West." Why? Because you've left us in the grip of China. Now they think the West isn't going to back us up, and they think they've got us. Right? That never comes across anyone's table in this part of the world. That's what they're all thinking. We've let them down. China is this monumental power. Even Russia is worried about it, which is why you keep getting these meetings. What are they up to now? And I'm not attacking the Chinese, but human beings being human beings and the real world that we live in, yada, 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 yada. And I got talking, since the conversation had initiated, with my dear friend Sultan, and he said, look, Chinese soldiers, if they're told to shoot someone in the back of the head, they'll do it, and they won't think anything's wrong. I mean, don't forget they're all Muslim in that part of the world. Oh, God, right, Stuart. Never say you're a pastor in a Muslim country. You've got to do bloody everything. David, can you open prayers before meal? Oh, David, there's someone down there. There's someone down there that needs a bit of comfort. Can you? Oh no, we need to say prayers before this concert starts. You get dragged into everything. So another myth that's blown away. Anyway, so they're all Muslims, and he said to me, would a Kazakh soldier do the same? Yes, they would. If they were ordered to shoot someone in the back of the head, they would do it. But they know it's wrong. And that isn't trivial. So I came away from that table, that dinner, with a new view and a frightening view of what we're all doing to each other simply because we're not talking. More talk, and more realization of real context. That's the only way out of this. And the way to save a civilization from the ancient Greeks onwards that has brought such light to the world. We're so busy looking nowadays at what we've done wrong. Hey, we've done loads of things wrong. But without remembering what we've done right, the world will actually be a darker place. And that's my 5 penneth worth, and I'll stick with it there.
Wow, thank you.
This conversation wouldn't be happening in China. If it was recorded and ever started to get on air, it would be instantly closed down and we'd all be arrested.
Wow.
Dang.
Just
Well, thank you again so much. This has been great, and I look forward to doing it again sometime real soon.
the honor
Thank
is
you.
mine. Honor
Thank
is
you,
mine.
Reverend David. So much
Thank you.
love.
Big love, big time, big love, big hugs. Take care.
Well, Stuart, I don't even know what to say about that. That was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Doesn't he have the most incredible energy? I knew you'd love him.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple emails that we were trading back and forth. I knew I knew it was going to be great, but it just blew me away. This is kind of really where I wanted to see this conversation go and push the envelope just so far in a different direction.
Yeah, he's absolutely fantastic. Very open in his ideas and very open-hearted. I love the guy.
Yeah, he's very very warm and you know he's got a great sense of humor. I definitely want to have another conversation with Reverend David. Absolutely.
Well, I'd talk to him for a week straight if I could, because he's so knowledgeable and so interesting.
Yeah. I'm just completely blown away. I'm speechless. There's themes emerging for me anyway. Like every time we introduce somebody, it's literally our honor and privilege, and then every time we're done, I'm just like, wow. So I hope that anyone who's listening and or watching has that same effect on them as it is on us, because this is really quite something.
Now, have you noticed the linkages between the interviews where someone will mention something and then the next interviewee will reference something from a previous interview? I'm absolutely fascinated. It's just happening naturally.
It is, and you know, nobody can see those other interviews yet because we're not even live at the time of this recording. So that's what makes it even more fascinating, is because they had no way of knowing what the other people said.
No.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, even I mentioned that Russian doll motif that Reverend David brought up. I mentioned
yeah,
John
you
E.
did.
Mack, and as it was happening, I was thinking, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you again, Stuart, for yet another amazing episode of Universal Disclosure. You know, our website, of course, is universaldisclosurepodcast.com for the audio only listeners. They might not see our banner and watermarks and such.
Yeah, well, as I've said before, and I mean this from the heart, thank you so much for taking me on this journey with you, Mike. It's an absolute honor and privilege.
Right back at you. Absolutely. This is amazing so far. I can't wait to see where we go next. In our next session, we speak with former Coast Guard and former New York City firefighter Andrew Razowitz. He's going to talk about his UAP experiences and how they changed him. You know what to do by now. Comment, like, subscribe, share. We do appreciate all of them so far, and keep them coming. Thank you so very much, and we'll see you real soon.